Vargas are really the foundation of astrology. You know, we look at that Rashi chart, and that may look like the foundation, but the truth is, when we look at the Rashi chart, we're really looking at all the Varga charts. And to think that we can do astrology by looking at just a Rashi chart and that's all we see, we won't be accurate. When we look at that Rashi chart, we always have to remember what we're really seeing is in all the Varga charts, all those divisional charts. So if I look at a planet at 6 degrees of Aries, okay, that planet is completely different than a planet at 18 degrees of Aries. Okay? When I just look at the Rashi chart, they look the same, but they're really going to be completely different. Let's say that planet is the Sun. Okay? That means in the Rashi, it's in Aries. In the Drakana, it will be in Aries. In the Hora, it will be in Aries. In the Navamsha, it's going to be in Taurus. So, it's going to be in it's going to be in Aries. In the Rashi, put R. The Hora, Varga 2. The Drakana, Varga 3. And in Taurus, in the 9, Navamsha chart. So right away we see, well, in respect to Rashi, which is body, Sun's exalted. So it'll help strengthen the body, maintain a disease-free body. In the Hora, which has to do with the Varga of accomplishment and wealth, it's exalted. So that Sun will give steadfast, consistent accomplishment and wealth. In the Drakana, it's exalted, which means in the Drakana it will give consistent happiness and strong bonds with siblings. In Taurus, it's in Navamsha, it's in Taurus, which is a natural enemy sign. So right away we know Sun is going to tend to give more inconsistencies and instability or lack of stability, lack of Sun qualities in marital affairs. Okay? In marriage. Now compare that to the Sun at 18 degrees. If the Sun is at 18 degrees, well, in the Rashi, it'll be in Aries. In the Rashi, Varga number 1. In the Hora chart, it's going to be in Libra. Okay, it'll be in Libra, believe it or not, in the Hora chart. In the Drakana chart, it'll be in Leo. So Leo in the Drakana. And in the Navamsha chart, it's going to be in the 6th Navamsha, is that right? 6th Navamsha, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is Virgo. In the Navamsha. It's a completely different Sun. So this Sun is going to be good for physical well-being. It's going to be unstable and inconsistent for wealth and accomplishment. It'll be solid and stable in Leo for siblings. And it'll be in a natural neutral sign, so just mediocre in Navamsha, and probably not be able to do too much for marriage, but won't actually hurt marriage like it probably would when it's in Taurus. So a completely different situation is happening with this Sun. And we can have the same Lagna. Let's say we've got a Leo Lagna. Okay? It's going to be a different life completely because they're in a different place of Aries. So we can't just look at a chart and think that a planet goes through this whole chunk of space. The Sun, for instance, taking an entire month there, 30 days, is going to give the same results everywhere it is. It's actually going to give 150 different results. Every planet in every sign gives 150 different results. Because if we take all the 16 Varga charts that Parashara recommends, if we just use those 16, we get 150 different results. If we use a couple other ones that other systems use, we even get more than 150. But that means with those 16 Vargas of Parashara, there's actually going to be 150 different array of 16 dignities throughout this sign. Okay? 150 changes. Completely different. Sun, that means the Sun every 1/5 of the day will give completely different results. And a planet like the Moon is going to give rapidly different results. So you can kind of see how when we're looking at a Rashi chart, we're not just seeing what appears to see there. We need to look at what that planet's doing all the way through. In the Rashi, it's in this dignity. In the Hora, in this dignity. In the Drakana, in this dignity. in the Chapter Tamsha, fourth Varga in this dignity, and so on and so on and so on. And when we got all those dignities, we can really see what that sun is equipped to do by being in that exact position that it's at in that chart. To just say, oh, the sun's in Aries, this is great, and the sun's in Libra, this is terrible, based on the Rashi chart, will just lead you to only be able to make very, very few predictions and very, very unreliable predictions. Vargas are the key to predictive astrology. They're what makes the person born right after you different from you, who has a completely different life, okay? It's not because you have different parents, because you have a completely different chart based on these Vargas. So that's how important these guys are. And we won't do a predictive astrology class really without incorporating Vargas, because you can't, okay? Not really. You can do some snapshot techniques without Varga charts, but for any really, good, clear analyzing of the chart, you have to use these Varga charts. So today, what our focus is really what the different Varga charts represent. And each Varga chart does three things. It represents something. So it represents some area of life. That in each Varga, a planet has a dignity, which means it's in an enemy's Rashi, a neutral's Rashi, a great enemy's Rashi, exaltation, whatever. In each Varga it has a dignity. And in each Varga it also has a deity. So in the Navamsha, each planet, depending on the Navamsha it falls in, will be a Deva, Manusha, or a Shastra Navamsha. In the Hora chart, the deity will actually be a planet. It'll be the sun or the moon. In the Chapter Tamsha chart, the deity will be one of the Sanat Kumaras. In the Drakana, the deity will be one of the important, original primordial rishis, one of the critical rishis, Narada, Durvasa, and so on. There's all in the Dasamsha, the dignities will be the deities, or the deities will be the deities of the 10 directions and all that. So there's a whole field of deities dealing with Vargas, which is basically unused. Okay? We're going to actually have lots of videos on this topic in the future. This is a really enjoyable topic where you can get a lot of insights about the person. So we've got a lot of things that these Vargas are doing. They're doing these three things. Today we're going to talk about just this first thing. I'm going to leave this stuff for later. Okay? And that is what each Varga represents. What area of life does it encompass? Well, the Rashi, the first Varga, represents Deha, which means the body. And what is the body? The body is the vehicle of the soul, and that vehicle is traveling down the road. So the Rashi represents the path that the body of your vehicle is upon. Okay? And it's on that path that you'll meet everything else you encounter in life. Everything else that the other Vargas represents, all these other Vargas we're going to talk about here, we meet all those other things on the path of our life that our bodily vehicle is traveling, represented by the Rashi. So we meet our spouse while we're going down the road of life, right? Everything we have in our life, we meet along the road of life of the Rashi chart, okay? A bodily vehicle carrying us down the path of our existence. That's what the Rashi is. The Hora chart, Varga number 2, has to do with Sampat. Okay, Sampat means accomplishment. And it represents material accomplishment in the sense that you're able to accomplish your material responsibilities. It's specifically the wealth and resources you have and need in order to fulfill your responsibilities. Okay? It's not the money you want to go buy a Learjet. It's not the money you want to stick in the bank so you have a hoard of money. It's the money and resources you use to take care of your responsibilities of feeding yourself, clothing yourself, as well as those family members and friends and other people that you're responsible. If you run an organization that, say, a charitable organization that takes care of homeless animals throughout the world, well, then this sampat also has to do with the resources for that responsibility. So whether your responsibilities are small and only pertain to yourself, or whether your responsibilities are huge, the resources for taking care of those responsibilities are Hora chart, the sampat. Okay? The drakana has to do with happiness with siblings. Okay? So that's what we see to see how we're getting along with our siblings. Okay? The fourth Varga has to do with Bhagya, called the Chakratamsha. Bhagya means fortune. Fortune is the abundance of life. You know, you're fortunate when you have a lot more than you need. You have an abundance of something. So anything extra, the wealth beyond what you need to fulfill your responsibilities. The wealth for luxuries, the wealth of landed property, those type of things. The wealth of buried treasure, you know, the wealth of the money in the bank. That's all represented by the fourth Varga. Okay, Bhagya, that fortune in life. But fortune, this literally means your share or portion. It's the portion of the world that you get. Do you get a big portion or a little portion? If you get a huge portion, you've got way more than you need, above and beyond. Okay? Second and fourth Vargas share some connotations mathematically, which we'll get into a little bit more advanced class. Right now, I'm just talking about the meanings given by Brihat Parashara. So that's the fourth Varga. Then Parashara skips all the way to the seventh. He doesn't deal with fifth and sixth. And that has to do with children and grandchildren. Okay, so your children and your grandchildren and their children, so your dynasty is the Saptamsha, your ability to procreate and create your children and leading on to your grandchildren. That's the Saptamsha Varga. Okay? Then Parashara skips to the ninth Varga, which is marriage or spouse. Okay? This is the Varga of spouse, number 9. Now, this sort of seems to fall out of order. We know the second house represents Varga 2. It has to do with wealth. It's not just like the second house has to do with the wealth to take care of your responsibilities. The Drakana has to do with the third Bhava has to do with siblings. Drakana has to do with siblings. Fourth Varga has to do with properties and banks and treasures. So does the fourth house. Children don't have anything to do with the seventh house. You're thinking fifth house. Well, seventh house is the house of sex and partnership, and it's that sexual relationship that gives birth to children. And that's why we give children to the Saptamsha, the seventh Varga. Because children are created through seventh house affairs. Okay? Then we go when the spouse is the seventh house, it's not the ninth house. Why do we go to Navamsha for spouse? Because this is spouse in the context of marriage. It's not just someone you're having sex with casually. This is your spouse that represents the marriage, that represents the ashram that you're in life. Are you in the marriage ashram? Are you in the ashram? You know, whatever. Or are you in no ashram and your life is a haphazard running around here and there? The Navamsha is that narrow path of the ashram that you're in. Whether you're in marriage ashram or ashram, whatever. For most people, it's marriage ashram. But it represents that path, and the Navamsha anchors us to the road in life. The minute a person gets married, their choices in life become limited, okay, compared to what they were. Now they can't just take off to India for 6 months, on a whim. They have to work all that out with their spouse. So when we narrow that path, we got this wide path that we're traveling with all these possibilities. To make the most of that path, we want to narrow that path so we go onward and upward. And we do that through the Navamsha, through choosing some ashram, most commonly the marriage ashram. And when we have afflictions to this chart, our ashram falls apart and we don't know where we belong in life. Where do I do it? Where do I go? The Navamsha helps keep that focus of the path that we're on. So it anchors us on our path through selecting an ashram, most commonly the marriage ashram, and therefore gives us a spouse. The 10th Varga, he gives Mahat Phala. So that means great fruits. The big deeds, big fruits in life, represented by the Dasamsha, the 10th Varga. Then the 12th Varga, the Dwadasamsha, has to do with parents and our ancestors. So you want to see what we get from our parents, our relationship with our parents and so on. We look at the 12th Varga, the Dwadasamsha. Okay? Okay, those first set, these first 8 Vargas, which are Vargas 1 through 12, but Parashara only uses 8 of them. That's half the Vargas. There's 16 Varga charts in entirety. Those first 8 have to do with all the more physical, embodied things. Those are the real concrete things in our life, okay? Then the rest of the Vargas represent less concrete things. In Vargas 13 through the next set of 12, which would be Vargas 13 to 24, we have the 16th Varga and the 20th Varga from Parashara. He works with 2 of those Vargas. And the 24th Varga, 3 of them, of course. Okay, in the next set of 12. The 16th Varga has to do with happiness and unhappiness of vehicles. Now, the key here, it doesn't have to do with vehicles per se. It has to do with happiness and unhappiness of vehicles. Or, the word they use for happiness in India is shukya, which literally means having a good axle hole. Because you have a nice axle hole, the wheels spin nice and smooth, and you go down the road nice and smoothly, and you're happy. That's the idea. So happiness is going through life smoothly without being perturbed. Unhappiness is going through life like this, on an emotional roller coaster. Okay? So, the 16th Varga has to do with happiness and unhappiness of vehicles as we travel through the world. So it does have to do with that literally with vehicles, which do actually just symbolize our happiness and unhappiness in our lives. Okay, so the 16th Varga has a lot to do with our emotional nature. Are we happy or unhappy? Okay, all these second set of 12 Vargas, in fact, all relate to our inner life. While these are the external concrete things in life, these second set represent more inner things. So our happiness, our psychological well-being, Parashara calls it happiness with vehicles, is the 16th Varga. And what's the first vehicle? The body, right? The deha, the body's the first vehicle. That's the vehicle we're always riding around in, right? Are we psychologically integrated into that vehicle? That's the first thing we can look at with that 16th Varga. Okay, so beginning with our bodily vehicle, the happiness and unhappiness we have found within ourselves is that 16th Varga. But also just happiness with any vehicles, okay? Then we have the 20th Varga, which he says is for Upasana. Upasanaya, I think is the word he actually uses. That has to do with worship. Okay, your worship. Your devotion, your worship, which is basically your ability to emotionally bond and connect through something out of loving desire. And then we have the 24th Varga, which has to do with, which actually is called Siddhamsha, which means the perfected Amsha or Varga. And it represents Vidya, which has to do with knowledge. So all these are inner things. Happiness, devotion, worship, and knowledge. Okay? These are the charts that are important in people that are spiritually determined. Okay? Then, in the next set of 12 charts, Parashara gives us the 27th Varga and the 30th Varga, and that's it. He doesn't, in the next set of 12, which would be 25 to 36, he only talks about the 27th and 30th. The 27th has a special name called Vamsha. Its common name is Saptavim Samsha, which means 27. But it's also called Vamsha, which Ba means the nakshatras. And it's called that because the deities of the Vamsha, or of the Vamsha Varga, are the nakshatra lords, the same as the nakshatra lords. So this is a very important Varga. Parashara says it's for Bala and Abala. Bala means strengths, and Abala means without strengths. So strengths and the things we're not strong in represents our skills and talents and the things we're clumsy and futile in. Okay? So really important Varga. This second set of Vargas has to do with our capacity to deal with things in life. Okay? Our ability to work hard, focus, use our skills, use our abilities to overcome difficulties. The 27th especially has to do with our skills and strengths and the things we're futilely incompetent with, our strengths and weaknesses. And we use those things as we progress through our life to manage things. Someone with a really strong 27th Varga chart can just be so good at doing everything that no matter what happens, they can work their way through it. They don't need help. They don't need to call someone up and say, I need help. They have always got the talents and strengths to figure something out, figure out a solution. We use these Vargas especially when we're dealing with problems. And most of life is dealing with problems, right? Because there's so many more naturally cruel planets that give problems and stress than there are naturally beneficial planets that sort out the stress by themselves. So whether we're writing a book, doing astrology readings, or digging ditches, we're going to run into problems. And so having a good 27th Varga makes everything in life better because it lets us deal with all those problems. It gives us strength. Okay? The Trim Samsha, the 30th Varga, has to do with Arishta. Arishta means suffering. Okay? Misfortunes. The things that go terribly wrong. That's the 30th Varga. It especially has to do with things that go terribly wrong in the context of the first Varga, the body. That's really critical for medical astrology. Parashara also says to look at the Trim Samsha for the same things we look at the Rashi chart for. So it's a similar connotation of the Rashi chart, the path of our body, but specifically with the tone of the misfortunes and sufferings that we can undergo along that path. Okay? The next Varga he talks about is the 40th and 45th. Okay, those are the next set of 12. Again, these are 1 through 12, 13 through 24, 25 to 36, and here 37 to 48. Parashara only mentions two, the 40th and 45th. The 40th Varga has to do with auspicious and inauspicious. So, auspicious and inauspicious things. So, the planets in this chart can go to extreme. Planets in good dignity and good states in the 40th chart can really help us have a lot of good stuff in our life. And things in bad dignity can really destroy things in our life very terribly. What will they destroy? Well, if the planet's destroying the second house, it destroys all second house matters. This is like a global effect of auspicious and inauspicious capacity that planets can bear down on houses and on each other. Okay? Or really great things that planets can give to houses. So this sort of has to do with, looking at all affairs in life, not a specific affair like these other Vargas, but in a way where it affects all things for particularly good or particularly bad. Then the 45th and 60th Vargas he gives the same meaning to, and that is complete and entire and whole effects. So holistic effects, the complete effects, the entire effects are determined by these two Vargas, 45th and 60th. The 45th Varga falls into this grouping of 12. The 60th Varga, from 49 to 60, that's the last tier of 12. Parashara talks about the 60th, the Shastra as it's called. And that has to do with complete effects. And so does the 45th. These are the same. So you look at those Vargas to see all areas of life. So if a person, let's say, has their second bhava bad in these two charts, that bhava is going to have this element of difficulty in every realm of life that they deal in. So these are sort of foundational in the sense that they set the limits for something. If the second bhava is bad in this, second bhava stuff in any Varga can only get so good. And so if you see it good in some Varga, you have to keep in mind it's not going to be as great. And that's what separates millionaires from, billionaires, let's say. Well, the billionaire is going to have all this stuff really nice in all of these Vargas, okay, these fine-tuning Vargas, whereas the person who's not that wealthy may have it strong here, but only mediocre here. So it just raises the bar or drops the bar on the other indications we see in these charts. The Shastra is especially important for that. It carries the most weight, and good planets in the Shastra can do a lot to override real problematical planets here in the other Vargas, and bad planets in the Shastra can do a lot to override what you see as other good planets in all the other Vargas. Okay? So we want to really learn and memorize these basic Varga indications. This is the foundation of what the different Vargas represent, so that we know which Varga to focus on. If somebody comes to you and says, "When am I going to get married? I'm having relationships all the time, but none of them's going anywhere," you have to look at the Vamsha. If you don't, you won't be able to find the answer for them. The person goes, "I'm just having a hell of a time conceiving," you have to look at the Saptamsha, or else you're just not going to manage it. The person says, "I'm fighting over with my siblings because my parents give them all the money." We have to look at the parent chart, the Dwadasamsha, and the happiness with siblings. Because now we're dealing with two family members. Okay? The person just can't make ends meet. We have to look at the Sampad, the accomplishment Varga, and so on. So we need to look at the right Varga for the right job, or for the right question or concern. Otherwise, we just won't get anywhere. The Rashi chart alone can teach us some things, and we can do a lot of good snapshot predictions just with the Rashi, because the Rashi is the path that we're on. So if we're on a path and all of a sudden we're going to fall off that path, we'll be able to see that in the Rashi. If we're on the path and we're going to bump into something desirable, we'll see that in the Rashi through lots of snapshot techniques. But to really see the complete analysis, we've got to look at those Vargas, because the planet is never just in one Varga. When you look at that sun in Aries, it's in a place in all these charts. And that's what that sun is doing. Don't ever just think it's just doing Rashi, or Hora, or Drakana. It's doing all of them, all the time together. And all that comes together to indicate what that planet's doing. I know it sounds confusing, but life is complex. There's a reason you're different than the person born right after you. If the Rashi chart was the only thing that mattered, every 60 years, the Rashi chart repeats itself. Believe it or not, every 60 years, the Rashi chart will repeat itself with the same planetary positions. So if the Rashi chart was all that mattered, every 60 years, people would just be reborn would be completely similar. There'd be the strong similarity, but they're not. People born 80 years ago are as colorful as people born exactly 60 years later, or in that 60-year time. No matter what age we're born in, we're completely colorful. Because the true planetary positions, when we deal with the Vargas, are, where there being 150 different permutations in each sign, are never repeated ever for anybody. Okay? So we're complete individuals. Okay, so that's a basic beginning understanding of Vargas. This is what you're going to use the most in Vargas. You won't do any predictive work really without considering these facets of the Vargas. So really learn these well. And you want to have these memorized and know them and work with them before you try to do more